Check it out. Agatha all along. Episode
Others
3.
say he might be a demon, or
Mephisto.
Mephisto.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Agatha All Along Episode 3 video. There were a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references, so we'll break it all down. Cannot believe they went full Mephisto this early in the series. Like everybody reaching to pull out your memes from back in WandaVision. They're back on the Mephisto bullcrap. We'll see where they take this. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos, and careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet. The episode titled Many Miles of Tricks and Trials is a reference to the next verse of the song The Ballad of the Witch's Road they sang to open the portal across dimensions, and it's a reference to their journey as they literally walk the road, encountering their first trial with a bunch of tricks. Part of the idea is that the Ballad of the Witch's Road is meant to be a map that people used to navigate the Witch's Road that was passed down through ancient times, through centuries, in the form of a song. That's why later Agatha says the instructions are literally in the lyrics of the song. As long as they follow those instructions, they should be fine. There are no big changes to the intro or the Marvel Studios.
That was
now the Marvel
surprising.
television logo, because
I don't
this is
like
gonna
it.
play in front of all the live-action television series. Like we'll see this logo in front of Daredevil Born Again next year. The
They should
opening
have just
scene
done their
actually
own,
opens right
like
after the end
Loki.
of last week's episode as they began to actually walk the road. When Agatha says the road suits Billy, and we'll just call him Billy, like I think 99.9% of us believe that he is Billy Kaplan. There are a lot of references and jokes about that during this episode, but when she says the road suits Billy, it's more of a goth teen joke, like he's been dressing very goth, and the environment at the beginning of the road is very dark and spooky, like, this seems kind of like your vibe. Mrs. Davis, real name, thinks that they kidnapped her, not getting any cell phone reception because they're in an alternate dimension, and she believes that they're literally just below surface in Westview. We
Little
actually find out this
Karen.
is part of the historical society in Westview, and there used to be a transit system that they failed to build underneath the town at some point. Like somebody tried to build an underground transit system. Maybe they'll pay that Easter egg off in a later episode. But the way the Witch's Road exists as an alternate dimension is kind of like the alternate dimension of the duat that Moon Knight goes to when he dies. Like he travels to an alternate dimension that's just based
Moon
on the
Knight was
duat, the
amazing.
Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife.
I need
There
to
are a couple
rewatch
moments later in
that.
the episode that you could also look at as being sly Moon Knight references too, just because his powers are based on the phases of the moon. Khonshu is the god of the moon in the MCU. There's a lot of crossover between different supernatural types of mythology, and Moon Knight sort of fits into the supernatural categories of Marvel heroes. There's a lot of table setting and exposition at this first part of the episode too, where you learn the other witches in the Coven don't know about the Salem Seven's revenge quest against Agatha. She's been hiding that and Rio's involvement from them.
Now
We'll
it's
probably
all
see
their
Rio either
problem.
in next week's episode or right after that. Eventually she will join their group. Probably to replace the dead Mrs. Davis, R.I.P. Don't worry, we'll talk about that too, because her death also might be just temporary. You have to remember they're in an alternate dimension, so the rules of existence and reality in this alternate dimension are not the same as the rules of reality inside the
It
normal
might be,
MCU
though.
dimension. But for most of the episode, they just want to hammer home the idea that Agatha does not care about anybody else here. She doesn't care about Billy. She doesn't care about the other witches. She just thinks of them as cannon fodder on her way to finish the Witch's Road and get her power back. Which is why she's hiding all these secrets from them. She hides more secrets from them later in the episode too, when it comes to Nicholas Scratch and how she got the Darkhold in the first place. Billy pipes up
She
a couple times
sacrificed
at the
him.
beginning of the episode with more lore and info dumps about witchcraft and how it works inside the MCU. That little notebook that he keeps jotting down notes and research about the Witch's Road and witchcraft in general is sort of like their version of the Grail Diary from Last Crusade. The notes in there will help them solve the Witch's Road. Lore dump is that covens share burdens, and part of the idea later in the episode is that in order to solve the trial, to fix the potion, they all have to be of the same mind and all work together. Pretty much all the trials will be like this in future episodes, like they'll all have to work together as a team to solve the trials. They're also kind of using Billy and Mrs. Davis as POV characters. Now, Mrs. Davis dies in this episode, so it'll be just Billy in future
They're just
episodes,
there to be
but
there.
it's sort of like the audience POV character to
Along
remind
for the
people about
ride.
how witchcraft works inside the MCU. Like, oh, and by the way, this works this way. It's just so people who have no idea about Marvel lore know what's going on. When Jennifer Kale yells at Mrs. Davis for not having magical qualities, Billy then pipes up saying that anybody can become a witch with the right kind of study. I think because they want to tease you with the idea that Mrs. Davis, if she comes back, like she's resurrected by the end of the series, she could eventually study to become a witch and quote-unquote join the club. because a couple times in the episode she makes references to that before she seemingly dies. But I don't think she is secretly
was enjoying
some other
the hell
character.
out of
Like, she's not
out of that
Mephisto in
wine, though.
disguise or anything like that. Like, she's just a normal person, and they're playing this as a joke right now. Lilia Calderou says, "Tame your worst fears," one of the next verses from the Ballad of the Witch's Road, figuring out that the road is more of a metaphysical dimension that can manifest their worst fears. So whatever each person's worst fear is, those will become the trials they face along the way. It just starts with Jennifer Kale's worst fears. But as you see later in the episode, even though the trial itself is based more on Jennifer Kale's existence in her life, the other witches face their own version of the trials within that larger trial. Like, they all have things within it that they have to face, specific to their own lives. Billy then gets some more lore dumps on how different types of magic work inside the MCU. He talks about using analog magic, which is basically what Jennifer Kale uses at the end of the episode, like physically making an actual potion instead of just waving her hand and using her magical power to do it automatically. Really good example of this automatic type of magic is Scarlet Witch's chaos magic. Like, she doesn't have to cast any spells or speak incantations. She can just point and make stuff happen with her power. Another really good example of analog magic is Doctor Strange's magic. Like, he actually weaves spells, but he had to read books to learn the spells and cast those incantations to make all those work. Loki's kind of the same way. He used a different type of magic, but
the
he also had to
witchcraft
read
magic
all these
back
magical
in the
books
series.
to learn the magic itself before he could do it without actually casting spells. Billy also refers to it as manual magic, like manual labor-based magic. Lilia then reveals that he's got a sigil on him. That's what the M and the W symbol on his mouth is when he tries to speak his name. I know there are a lot of theories about this, and they're definitely yanking our chains on some of the theories, specifically in this episode, because like they literally mention the word Mephisto later, and that's mostly to just stoke the fires of theory crafting, incorrectly, I think. Like, they're purposefully messing with us on some of the Easter eggs. But I think the M and the W symbol here, like, it's meant to look like both an M and a W is meant to be for Maximoff and Wanda. So they want you to think that Scarlet Witch may have laid the sigil on him. But there was actually an interview with the showrunner a couple days ago, and she said that Billy put it on himself. And the way they talk about it, that it's put on someone to protect them from other witch kind. Basically hide him, shroud him from view from other witches. If Billy really put this sigil on himself, I think the idea is that he was trying to hide his identity from all the other witches, not necessarily Agatha, but he was also probably trying to protect his family, the Kaplans. The way the showrunner talked about it, though, like the actual sigil, is that it's meant to look like an amateur did it, which is why Billy did. Like, he is the amateur who doesn't know everything about magic. Like, he's very powerful, but he's not extremely learned, which is why he went to Agatha for help. Like, he's like, I have some talent, but I need more help to actually solve the witch's road. That's why when
get his full potential,
being the one to put the sigil on him, she denies it, saying that it's the work of an amateur and it's way beneath her, all because a teenage Wiccan tried to, kind of unsuccessfully, put it on himself. Sort of like the joke of like a teenager trying to give themselves a piercing or give themselves a tattoo and not doing a great job of it. So early theory, because he did a very amateur job of putting that sigil on himself, the information will leak out and Agatha will eventually figure out who he really is. When she calls Billy a pest with a cranky witch stashed under a rock, that's another Scarlet Witch reference. Mrs. Hart gets them into their first trial. Sinking in the mud feels sort of like a Swamp of Sorrows, never-ending story kind of bit, with her having to yank her out before she sinks in. But like I said, the first actual trial winds up being for Jennifer Kale. The showrunner said that it's meant to give you Big Little Lies vibes, because that's sort of the reality that she was trapped in real life when Agatha found her, like selling these potions to those types of people that you saw on that TV show. If you did not see Big Little Lies, it's another HBO series with a group of women who band together.
Damn, we watched everything.
In this coven band together, and eventually wind up killing one of their husbands and then having to cover it up. They also end this episode with Mrs. Davis dying, kind of like the husband dies at the end of Big Little Lies. The front door has the phases of the moon here, and the full moon is meant to represent the water phase. I know people are thinking Moon Knight here, like, wait a minute, is this related to Khonshu, the god of the moon, or Moon Knight, because his powers are tied to the phases of the moon? But when Billy says it's the water phase, water also corresponds to Jennifer Kale's element. Like, each of the witches have a different element that they correspond to, and a different color that their magic corresponds to. Notice when they step into the house, the aspect ratio changes from letterbox to 16:9, which they did all the time during WandaVision, genre to genre, episode to episode, depending on whose perspective you were taking in the episode. When they step inside, notice how relieved Agatha is when she sees that her brooch is still there. I think we've decided after watching episode 1 and episode 2 a couple times that the hair in the locket actually belongs to Nicholas Scratch, her probably dead son. Pretty much all the references in episode 1 make it seem like Nicholas Scratch was
She
real
probably
and
wants to
did die
use it
some
at the
point.
end.
But later in the episode, Jennifer Kale kind of yanks Billy's crank a little bit on theories about what happened to Nicholas Scratch. Don't worry, we'll get to that in a second because I think she's partially correct, but not entirely correct. Mrs. Davis foreshadows her own death when she says, "Bury me inside this kitchen," like they literally wind up having to bury her eventually by the end of the episode.
Badass under the
The
kitchen.
invitation reads, "My age has value, I'm no fun alone, I mess with your mind, my tricks are well known," which is obviously a reference to the wine, like finely aged wine. But the wine itself, even if you don't speak Spanish, is mostly a Scarlet Witch reference. The bottle reads Reina en Rioja, which means queen, and Rioja is read using the female conjugation. Crianza 2016 means breeding in 2016, Producto de España, product of Spain, probably a reference to when Scarlet Witch destroyed the entire building in Captain America Civil War, killing a ton of people and setting off the events that led to the Sokovia Accords. Pretty much any time Billy is in frame and you see Easter eggs for Scarlet Witch in the background, I feel like it's more references to him eventually being revealed as Billy.
I wonder how they're gonna react
Moments of that later
if they
in the
know
episode,
that
when they're like
that's
really on the
Wanda's
nose
son.
about referencing him being
It's gonna
like
be
Billy.
interesting.
Jennifer Kale then tells him that Agatha sacrificed her son, Nicholas Scratch, to get the Darkhold. So a lot of theories about that. People actually came up with that theory before this episode aired. That might have had something to do with the falling out that she had with Rio a long time ago, the reason why she hates Rio. Later in the episode, Agatha actually hears her baby, Nicholas Scratch's cries, but sees the Darkhold in his crib, so I think that confirms that at least some of what Jennifer is saying is true, but maybe not everything.
The
We'll probably get the
sacrifice.
full truth eventually because Agatha keeps lying to everybody about what happened to Nicholas Scratch and what she's really doing here. Pretty much anything that happens to Agatha, she lies about to them right now. The early theory, though, is that Nicholas Scratch did die because of her quest for the Darkhold, but I don't think she literally traded his life to like Mephisto or one of the other demons inside the MCU to gain the Darkhold. I think maybe he was just collateral damage in her quest for the Darkhold in some way. Because the whole series is meant to be the redemption of Agatha, I think eventually she will come to think of Billy as her surrogate son and try to protect him. Jennifer Kale then spouts off a whole bunch of
She was
theory
starting to
crafting
care
things.
for
Like, this
them
is the show
towards the
messing with
end.
you, very clearly trying to mess with you. She says the magic word Mephisto, claiming that Nicholas Scratch might be alive, might be a demon too, like Agent of Mephisto. Here's the thing about that. Now, the show is definitely messing with us. Like, don't read too deeply into that because the showrunner said that when WandaVision was happening and all the crazy Mephisto theories and all the other crazy theories really threw them off. Like, she hated all the WandaVision theories. So when it came time to do Agatha, she actually baked a lot of that stuff into the show, purposefully trying to mess with people. So a lot of the theories that they plant here with like the mention of Mephisto are meant to be dead ends, like not actually pay off the way you think. But in the comics, Nicholas
It'll
Scratch,
pay off in the
Agatha's
long
son,
run.
had dealings with Mephisto, and in real life lore, like real life witchcraft, Nicholas Scratch is also one of the names that the devil goes by. When it comes to the demon mention, that's actually a reference to Senior Scratchy, the bunny, Agatha's bunny, who is a demon trapped in bunny form by Agatha. But it's not meant to be her actual son, like the bunny is not her son. There was
The
actually a
bunny's not
deleted
even
scene from
around
the
no more.
WandaVision finale with like a big battle that Quicksilver got involved in, and the bunny was going to turn into a demon during that battle and help them. Also notice that the bunny did not make it to the Witch's Road with them. Next
That's what I
big
just
theory
said.
that they try to use to mess with you is when Jennifer Kale suggests that Agatha would not recognize her own son if he showed up on her doorstep, and I think that's meant to be the show trying to purposefully mess with you to make you think that Billy here is actually Agatha's son Nicholas Scratch in a different body.
That would be
Here's the whole
crazy.
thing with that. I am 99% sure that he is Billy Kaplan, aka Wiccan from the comics Scarlet Witch's son, and the show is also here just purposely messing with us. Like I said, though, I think as part of Agatha's redemption arc, she will come to think of Billy as a surrogate son, but not like her biological son. Be aware of the show planting all kinds of false theories like this throughout all the episodes. Like, they're just going to keep doing this to us. Mrs. Davis, not one to waste the wine, drinks it down in one gulp. The timer that appears is just a countdown that will probably happen in each of the different trials, episode to episode. The actual 30-minute duration is also a bit of a joke about the length of the episodes. Like the episode on Disney Plus is about 30 minutes when you take out the credits and like the recap at the beginning of the episode. So the idea is that they have to complete the trial by the end of the episode or they'll die. And a big part of doing that is that they all have to go through it together, which is why it takes Agatha having to be forced to take the wine and forced to work with them. Like they all have to be of the same mind to make the potion and use Billy's
She was
blood
not ready
at the
to
end of the
die.
episode
She didn't
to
want to
fix
take
everything.
that.
Notice they won't let Billy drink the wine. That's both a joke about him being too young because he's still a teenager, and this is Disney, wouldn't want Disney breaking the law, but also this is probably a sly way to prevent him from being subjected to whatever's going on during the trial itself, and the representation of wine just in general in mythology. Literally and metaphorically, Billy is meant to be like the untainted virgin, so they use the virgin's blood at the end of the episode to finish the potion. There's a bunch more theories they plant here in Billy's conversation with Alice Wu. She reveals she got a witch-themed tattoo in Colorado when her mother was playing a concert at Red Rocks. We actually see her mother in the end credit scene. She's the one that's singing the Ballad of the Witch's Road.
She was in the show
an actual
too.
rocker that sang a pop version of the Witch's Road song. Because it's Billy and we're talking about Red Rocks, anytime you see red mentioned or red in the background when Billy is around, it just feels like another Scarlet Witch sly reference too. She explains more of her backstory, talks about her mother to sort of set up her trials in the Witch's Road, like all the visions that she has of her mother. We'll probably see more of those in future episodes. When Billy says a lot happened to him at age 13, just like Alice, that's more references to the events of WandaVision and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness with the Hex and being
Wouldn't he
reincarnated
remember
into
that?
another body to the Kaplans. A lot of people wondering, how did Billy come back if he was fake and made inside the Hex? Part of the idea is the way Scarlet Witch's chaos magic works is that she can literally create them out of nothing. Like that's how powerful she is. What happened when the Hex came down is that their souls survived and were reincarnated into other bodies, which is why Billy's teenage body looks different from his young Billy body. But here's the thing about that. When Alice says that she likes his haircut, notice that his haircut is designed to look the exact same as young Billy's haircut during WandaVision, more references to him being Scarlet Witch's Billy. What's not clear here, though, is whether he knows that Scarlet Witch is really his mother, because in the comics, he did not start out that way, so I think they're actually trying to follow the comics, and at this point here, he does not know that Scarlet Witch is actually his mother. Early theory is that he still thinks that he's Billy Kaplan. Mrs. Davis then talks with the others about the tropes and misconceptions about witches over the ages. This is also reference to misconceptions about witches in real life too, like Halloween, pointy hats, green skin. Do you see us riding on any brooms, brewing any potions, and any cauldrons? The funny part about this is that all these things wind up happening. They have to do all these things later in the episode and in future episodes, so some of the legends are actually based in truth. Like there will be a Wizard of Oz themed trial. Agatha is playing the role of the green-skinned Wicked Witch. They will actually ride on brooms eventually, and they use a cauldron, makeshift cauldron, at the end of the episode to solve everything. And if you remember, Agatha joked about witches eating children during episode 2, like, babies are delicious. They wind up having to crawl into an oven at the end of the episode, another reference to witches cooking children. Which I also think is a bit of a joke on Hansel and Gretel, because then Lilia Calderu says, this actually happened to one of my friends a long time ago. I think that's a reference to her being friends with the witch from Hansel and Gretel. Like they're saying in the MCU that tale was based on a real event and her friend got cooked inside an oven like they did inside the Hansel and Gretel story. Mrs. Hart then jokes about joining the club, like becoming part of the coven eventually, and drinking the blood of a virgin, which they then also have to do at the end of the episode because they drink Billy's blood inside the potion. Everybody's faces swell up.
You gotta reverse the spell.
Surgery. Billy's doesn't because he didn't drink the wine. Also, Agatha's doesn't until she's forced to drink the wine. They start having flashbacks. Mrs. Davis is to the events of WandaVision, begging Scarlet Witch to release them from the Hex so that he can breathe. I think the idea is that that's during the finale and it's her husband who wound up dying. They reveal that Jennifer Kale's beauty products have all kinds of dangerous chemicals in them, so the things that she was sued for in real life, she actually did, and she was correctly sued and lost. Like the fact that her power was taken because of what she was doing.
That's kind of crazy, I ain't gonna lie.
When Lilia blurts out to save Agatha, that's probably something that someone will say in a future episode, because remember, she's a divination witch. She randomly has visions of the future uncontrollably, so she'll probably just blurt out the future episode to episode. So anytime she says something that seems like it doesn't make sense, it's probably something that will happen in a future episode. The person that Jennifer Kale hallucinates looks like one of her former teachers who was probably jealous of her because he tries to drown her, saying she's the one who's nothing now, like implying that he somehow died because he felt like a failure. She was really amazing because of her ability with witchcraft and potions. Lilia sees what looks like a young version of herself from when she lived in Italy, where she actually sees what looks like her mother dying.
See, I didn't even know
death,
what that
like
was.
the representation of death and the literal version of death inside the MCU behind her. When she says to Agatha she's dead, all of them are dead, they're probably just her original family, like her biological family. Most people, when they think of death inside the MCU as a character, they think of Thanos in the original Infinity Gauntlet saga. She's an actual character inside the Marvel Universe, and like the reason why Thanos originally assembled the Infinity Gauntlet and snapped half of all life in the universe to unsuccessfully win her hand. Like, he tried to win her hand, but she didn't care. There have been a couple of sly references to the cosmic entity
Thanos wanted
death
that
inside the
wrist.
MCU. Like, there was one in Thor: Love and Thunder in the hole where Eternity was. But in the past, the MCU has generally toned down a lot of the really supernatural, like really wild lore from the comics, especially when it comes to like the bigger Avengers movies. Maybe that will change now heading into like Marvel Phase 6 and Marvel Phase 7. Like, we'll see more supernatural characters all over the place just in general. So I think that's why they're more comfortable getting into like cosmic entities like death now. Alice has a vision of her mother in the sauna. The fire on the lighter that she has corresponds to Alice's element, like her mother's element. It just passes through their family. She tells her about her grandmother dying across the world and feeling it just because of the way magic works inside their family line. And when she says it's her turn now, it's meant to be part of the curse that Alice mentioned that she thought was part of the women in their family. Like the idea that some sort of burden is passed down from mother to daughter within their family. This is just like the first teaser for that. We'll probably learn more about what that actually means in future episodes, like what the actual burden is that her mother now carries and that Alice will eventually have to carry. You start to see Agatha seeming like she's having empathy for some of the other members, like she sees Lilia and she tries to genuinely comfort her. So this is the slow part of Agatha's redemption. Like, this is just the beginning of the series. Then the glass windows start to
She
break,
gonna be a
revealing that
good
they're
witch
underwater and they'll
after.
drown unless they complete the trial. Mrs. Davis is really hard up. Like, she seems like she's on the edge of death. They barely save her life until they don't at the end of the episode. Agatha hears her son Nicholas Scratch's baby cries. Like I said, this is meant to be his crib, but under the blanket, seeing the Darkhold, confirming at least some of what Jennifer said about her backstory and what she did to sacrifice to get the Darkhold. Her whole reaction here when she unfurls the cover in the crib and gets scared staring at the baby is also meant to be a direct parody of Rosemary's Baby when she was also opening up looking at the demon inside the crib. My assumption right now is this is meant to be a bit of a misdirect, and she didn't literally trade her baby Nicholas Scratch for the Darkhold. She just pursued the Darkhold, like pursued her career over that of being a mother, and it led to the death of her son. But I do think it has something to do with Rio, and sort of paying off the Mephisto references from earlier. A lot of people also wondering if maybe she might be tied to Mephisto too. Rio might be, because she says he has a black heart, and the black heart character in Marvel is meant to be the daughter of Mephisto. So even though I
Shit,
think the show
might
is
be.
kind of yanking our cranks a little bit when it comes to the Mephisto references, they could actually pay that off in a somewhat satisfying way if Rio herself is somewhat tied to the Mephisto character, but I don't think she herself is actual Mephisto.
She's probably just a
Supposedly,
normal
they cast the
witch.
character and was going to show up at some point during the Ironheart series. Weird place of all places for Mephisto to show up, but one of the villains during that is going to be the Hood character played by Anthony Ramos, and he basically makes a bargain with Mephisto to get magic. Supposedly, Sacha Baron Cohen filmed some scenes as MCU Mephisto for that series. We'll see if that winds up being true or not. It's just a rumor right now. Because Agatha lies about what she actually saw in her hallucination to the group, I think eventually the group will hear the truth from her. Like, eventually, as part of her redemption, she will come clean about everything to them, but probably not at first on purpose. Like, some secrets about her will be revealed through their journey, and eventually Agatha will be forced to come clean, but then will ultimately redeem herself by the end of the series. But if it wasn't clear, just to reiterate the idea, I do not think that Billy here is meant to be her son, Nicholas Scratch. I do not believe that theory. I think that he's Billy Kaplan, aka Wiccan, Scarlet Witch's son from the comics, reincarnated into Billy Kaplan's body. If you think that's confusing, like how could he come back with this reincarnation you're talking about? Yes, it is that complicated in
It's
the comics.
Marvel.
It's every bit as twisty in the comics as it will be in the MCU. I believe a big part of the show will be slowly revealing the truth about that. Then there's an interesting line where Jennifer says that a man stole her magic like a dude stole her magic. Later, Agatha says a they, like multiple plural men, stole her magic. They don't say who they are, they just make it sound like some ethereal group of powerful people that were able to steal her magic. When it comes to people policing the use of magic inside the MCU, normally you think of the Sorcerer Supreme or like Doctor Strange, so either Wong or Doctor Strange or previous Sorcerer Supremes like the Ancient One, for instance, who is not a man. So early theory here is that they're going to introduce some other governing body of magic in
They're
witchcraft
probably gonna
inside
go
the
against
MCU,
it.
and those will be some of the antagonists in the background of the series, like the people that are stealing magic from these witches, not just Agatha stealing magic from the witches. Agatha then reveals more about her history with Jennifer Kale. This is more of Agatha's redemption too, like showing that she wasn't always a terrible person. She says that she never stole Jennifer's power in the past, even though she could have if she wanted to, because she thought the work that Jennifer was doing as a witch was important, like she respected her, so she left her alone. I already explained the joke about Billy's virgin's blood that they have to drink and then crawling through the oven, Hansel and Gretel style. But they basically wind up going out Goonies style flume ride to get back to the road. Like it feels very Goonies here. I think the whole idea with Mrs. Davis dying is she probably just died from the trauma, like the shock of what just happened to them. Like I said, early theory is that they might resurrect her by the end of the series and bring her back. She might wind up learning witchcraft and becoming part of the coven eventually. But I think part of the idea is they kill her off at the beginning of the series just to sort of give you an idea of the stakes, like people can die here, and also to leave room in their group for Rio to show up next week in episode 4. Remember the prophecy that Lilia gave them on the paper, the Black Heart. Rio was meant to be part of their group originally. Mrs. Davis was not meant to come here. They pay off the joke of Agatha never remembering her name, like who are you talking about? Because she only remembers her as Mrs. Hart, her identity inside the Hex. She kept forgetting her name earlier in the series. In over the end credits, they play Off With Your Head music because the lyrics are a metaphor for the action of the episode. There are a bunch of Easter eggs and references. I feel like I addressed most of the false leads in theories that they want you to think about, but will wind up ultimately not being paid off at the end of the series, like all the Mephisto stuff, all the stuff about Billy being Nicholas Scratch and not actually being Billy. Keep in mind there's going to be a lot of that during the series, like a lot of red herrings where they'll want you to theorycraft about certain things, plant certain ideas that will ultimately not pay off. If you spotted any other Easter eggs or references during the episode that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. My full episode 4 video will post next week. And big reminder, the Batman Penguin episodes are happening
Bro, I
right
want to
now.
watch
My
that
episode
shit.
2 video will post this Sunday after they
Penguin.
release it.
Everyone's saying
There's
it's
a bunch of
really
big stuff
good.
coming up. I just did a big Thunderbolts trailer video. Click
But
here for that.
that's
to see
it.
the Sentry inside the
Subscribe. Or more.